Since the beginning of time, people have spent countless hours dialing in their perfect signature guitar tone and then being a little disappointed when they can't do anything with it without having to go to a super expensive studio with a super experienced engineer and a whole bunch of equipment that you can't afford. Then came along like digital modeling solutions like the Pod Bean and the Floor Pod X3 and the HD and Axe Effects and Kemper, and the list goes on and on. And that's awesome because now you could get very high quality studio grade guitar tones direct into your DAW. But the issue is that if you are glued to a sound that you know you have in an amp, you kind of can't, you can approximate it, but you're not going to get it dead on. In the last 5 years or so, there's been a lot of dramatic improvements made to load boxes, which have been around for a while, but now they kind of tend to work and respond a lot more how you would expect an amp to come out of a speaker. Like I said, load boxes are not necessarily anything new, but now there's reactive load boxes, which, a brief explanation for those who don't know, basically reactive refers to the load box's ability to simulate the impedance curve of a speaker or a cabinet that they use basically to get the algorithm that they're gonna use for the impedance curve. So if it's fixed at 8 ohms, it's not gonna 100% sound like how a speaker would, which is gonna kind of fluctuate as you're playing. These boxes work to do that, and there's a ton on the market. I'm not gonna overview all those. I'm gonna leave some links in the description so you can check out, maybe see what works best for you. I like this because it has an impulse response loader as well as native software, which is what I'm gonna use for all the tracks in this video. Okay, so one of the big things for me also is just that if I'm at home, I'm playing guitar, I'm writing, I'm practicing, whatever it is, 99% of the time I'm doing that with an amp. So if I want to record an idea, that basically means now I got to shut the amp down, I need to bust out the Helix, I need to try and replicate the tone running software on my computer. And for me, that's just generally not how I love to do things, and it ends up taking a whole bunch more time than just being able to plug the speaker tap from my amp out into a load box and kind of be off and running with the sound that I was just using. Okay, so one of my favorite things about using all analog gear to record, or a lot of analog gear to record, I should say, is that you can kind of combine things in a way that it's much less likely that other people have tried, and you can sort of get tones that are better than maybe you even thought you could get with just different pedal orders, different pedals, change a speaker. There's variances in capacitor values and resistor values and amps and all these kind of irregularities that you don't get with modeling gear, which can be bad. It's definitely less consistent. Your tube could go microphonic, whatever. Things change, maybe even on a day-to-day basis sometimes. But for me, that's actually, it's a really fun way to work. You can get all these different sounds, other people don't have them, and it kind of leads into my next point, that if you do like to collect pedals and you have a whole bunch of them, some of them might, and you may really, your only option is a modeling unit to plug them into. Some pedals are not gonna react the way that they would, even if you get the amp model spot on, you A/B it with your real amp, it sounds identical. You plug a tube screamer into the front, it's gonna sound a little bit different going into a modeling unit than it will into a real tube amp. It just doesn't respond to input signal the same way. Another thing to keep in mind with modeling equipment is that as time goes on, it's basically just gonna improve. Processors get cheaper, the prices get better. Old units are always gonna sound how they used to. With a tube amp, you'll see things like a manufacturer that made a transformer goes under, and now they can never really replicate the sound of X amp again and actually do it faithfully. So there's nothing really prohibiting you from kind of taking a break from using modeling equipment and then getting back on it at a later date. You don't have to worry that you're never going to be able to find that sound again, or you can back up to an old firmware, whatever it is. You can reliably get the tone in the future if that's what you so choose. With an amp, it might be on the market, then it's off the market, then they don't come up for sale, or the price goes way up, and they can try to reissue it or whatever, but it's not necessarily going to sound the way the original did. The reason initially that I did buy a Helix was for an at-home recording solution. I didn't necessarily plan on gigging with it, and then once kind of the option came along to record the rest of my equipment at home, the Helix kind of started to see less and less use, and you kind of get more familiar with your stuff, and you make some of the more character tones and the weird stuff that you can get out of the Helix with your real equipment. And yeah, it just kind of got filtered out as time went on, and I started to be able to use my amps more often. So one of the most obvious upsides to using a piece of equipment like a modeling unit is that you have your whole rig basically in one box. You don't have to worry about pedals. You can run right out to front of house if you want. You don't even need a cabinet on stage. That stuff's really appealing. You get kind of flexibility all in one box. In my own life, I've used it basically on a gig that I was playing bass that I had to play 3 or 4 songs in the set list on guitar. So it's nice and easy. You don't need 2 different amps. You could just plug your guitar right in, switch the patch. But with that said, that functionality is not something I find myself personally using all the time. But for somebody who really does love the sound they're getting out of their Helix, it could definitely be really appealing to have it just all in one unit. So I touched on this when I was talking about the tube amps. As kind of a pro for using tube amps, but it could also be looked at as a pro for the Helix, that you have consistency. Like, you don't really have to worry about component values fluctuating a little bit. You don't have to worry about some tubes having a little bit more gain than others, or kind of things of that nature. Another thing is that you will save a lot of time if you so choose to just kind of hop on a forum and download great rigs that other people have already put together. That's not something I find myself doing, mainly for fun. If you're just looking to get a great guitar tone, there are plenty of people who have come up with great guitar tones, and it's as easy as plugging it in with a USB cable and it's in your device now. So that could be very appealing for a lot of people. Another thing, and this is an important one, is that if you're trying to replicate a tone that is kind of bred with a modeling unit, like a really tight, genty rhythm tone, or a clean sound with headroom that you're not really gonna find in most tube amps, there's no reason to go out and buy 6 noise gates and a 5153 to get that tight, genty tone, when you could just load up a patch on your Helix or your Axe Effects and it's ready to go. There's a lot of useful features. Like, you can use most of these units as just a standalone recording interface. You can plug a microphone into them. They have stereo outs, they have balanced outs, they have balanced ins, all sorts of this stuff that could make your life a lot easier that I never personally found helped me all that much. But with that said, if you do already have amplifiers and pedals and stuff that you love to use, that's basically the point of this video, is to just demonstrate you don't need to go out and buy a modeling unit anymore to capture those right in your computer silently at home, no fuss. All right, thank you for tuning in. So those are some of my main reasons why I'm gonna get rid of my Helix. Really excited to be able to record my amps at home now. I wanted to just let people know that if they're in a similar situation, you want to start recording at home, you can't really make a lot of noise, you can get really good results now. You don't have to buy a bunch of stuff. So that's kind of the point of the video. Let me know what you would do. Leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe. Later.